student visa. Ehud Olmert and anyone, just like you or anyone else, is entitled to say whatever they want. Whether he says that if he's here on a visa, it depends how he would be here in the United States as to whether he would be able to say whatever he wants, right? Like that goes for anyone coming from any country.
Dave Rubin, thank you for talking to Newsnight.
If you've been following this channel, you already know Dave Rubin. We've covered his political commentary before, and today he's stepping right back into the spotlight. This time, he's attempting to defend the Trump administration's record on free speech while explaining away some very uncomfortable contradictions. And when you listen closely, the argument starts becoming increasingly difficult to defend. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So, let's watch the exchange in full, and then I'll break down exactly what happened and why it matters.
One person who's strongly sympathetic to President Trump on universities is Dave Rubin, host of the conservative political talk show, The Rubin Report. Millions follow him on social media. Mr. Rubin is in Hungary to attend a centre-right conference on free speech. I caught up with him in Budapest earlier, and I began by asking Mr. Rubin to outline the Trump administration's concerns about free speech.
The protections that we Americans have around free speech, the First Amendment, of course, of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, really offer us the most robust protection to say whatever we want, whether it is critical of the government or it is offensive to a group of people or whatever it might be. Now, of course, we have limits to that. You can't point at a specific person and say, to a mob and say, go get him. You can't make a direct death threat, that sort of thing. And then we have very, very tight laws around libel and slander. But beyond that, you can say whatever you want. You can be an anonymous troll on Twitter/X and say mean things. And really, it's up to the person on the receiving end of that to figure out what to do with it, whether they're going to be offended or anything else.
Let me ask you about a very famous case in this country. This is Lucy Connolly, who last year, she tweeted the following after learning that 3 children had been murdered in a knife attack at a Taylor Swift themed dance class in what she wrongly thought was an attack by an immigrant. And this is what she tweeted: "Mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bastards for all I care." I should say she rapidly withdrew that tweet. But do you think that there are limits? Do you think it's right that in that case that is crossing a line?
Right. So I think, calling for mass deportations or calling to protect your border or have a sovereign nation or things like that, that absolutely falls within the right of free speech. Calling for specifically the burning down of a hotel where someone might be, and I'm doing this in sort of the vaguest sense because I'm not 100% familiar with the full details of the story that you're laying out there, that could potentially be a little bit more of a direct call for violence, which again, from a United States perspective, if you're directly calling for violence for someone, you would be in trouble. But I want to be as vague as I can be in this specific case. Incitement to violence is basically the line that we have with the First Amendment. Also, keep in mind that, a lot of people conflate free speech and hate speech. You're allowed to say hateful things. I mean, the Supreme Court of the United States decided that there is no such thing as hate speech in effect. You can say really awful things to people, and that's just part of life.
So if you're saying that there is a presumption in favor of free speech, let me take you to the United States and to Massachusetts, which is a student at Tufts University who was lifted off the streets by ICE immigration officials for co-authoring an op-ed that was critical of the state of Israel.
Well, I don't know about that case specifically.
It's a very famous case. It's a very famous case. This is what she wrote. It was Rümeysa Öztürk, and in a joint op-ed, she talked about credible accusations against Israel include accounts of deliberate starvation and indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians and plausible genocide. Highly contentious claims, but not.
Well, they're nonsensical claims. I defend her right to be able to say it as a citizen of the world, but there's a difference between being a citizen of the United States and being here on a green card or on a student visa or anything else. It's not a right to be a citizen of the United States.
Let me just clarify, Dave Rubin, had a US citizen written that op-ed, that's okay, but because it's a student from outside the United States, that's not okay.
Well, yes, our Secretary of State Marco Rubio just testified in front of Congress about this. You do not have all of the rights guaranteed to you by the United States if you are not a United States citizen, as simple as that. If you are going to come here from China or Turkey or Egypt or anywhere else to raise havoc on our streets or to protest or do whatever you want, we can make a decision to decide whether you can stay in this country or not. A regular citizen, a citizen who was born and raised in the United States, who's protesting and wants to say whatever noxious statements she was saying, of course you can say those things.
What about this? This is an article that's been written in the last 48 hours talking about how Israel is committing war crimes, talking about how starving out Gaza, the Israeli authorities are starving out Gaza, and talking about how some of the settlers in the West Bank are doing things that is tantamount to genocide. That was written by Ehud Olmert in Haaretz, the former Israeli Prime Minister. Would he be lifted off the streets by ICE detention officials for writing that?
Well, first off, he's not an American citizen. I mean, he's also...
That's right, he's not an American citizen, so he's the same status as that Turkish student. Is he going to be lifted off the streets of the United States if Ehud Olmert turns up in Massachusetts?
I see the silly little BBC game you're doing here. I get it. So he is entitled to say whatever he wants. He can write whatever he wants in Haaretz, which is a basically unread, crazily far-left newspaper in Israel that only propagandists in the West, like the BBC, use as evidence of something. There is no starvation, there is no genocide, et cetera, but he's welcome to say those things.
But what he has said is pretty similar to what that Turkish student said, and she was lifted off the streets. So Ehud Olmert, also not a US citizen, presumably he would be lifted off the streets if he popped up in the US.
Well, if he was here on vacation and just said something, he'd be allowed to do it. But there's a difference between being here on vacation and being a student visa. Ehud Olmert and anyone, just like you or anyone else, is entitled to say whatever they want. Whether he says that if he's here on a visa, it depends how he would be here in the United States as to whether he would be able to say whatever he wants, right? Like that goes for anyone coming from any country.
Dave Rubin, thank you for talking to Newsnight.
And this is where Dave Rubin's argument completely falls apart. Because after listening to that exchange, you have to ask a very simple question. Was he genuinely unaware of the case? Or was he simply avoiding the issue because acknowledging it would undermine the argument he was trying to make? The problem is that the interview itself puts him in a difficult position. He spends the conversation arguing that free speech protections depend heavily on whether someone is an American citizen, particularly when that person is in the United States on a student visa. But that is precisely where the discussion becomes much more complicated. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, and non-citizens in the United States can have constitutional protections too. Their immigration status does not automatically erase their constitutional rights. So when Rubin tries to draw this incredibly simple line between American citizens and foreign students, it leaves out a huge part of the legal and constitutional debate. And then comes the most interesting moment. When the interviewer brings up the case involving the Turkish student, Rubin suddenly says he doesn't know the specifics. Really? This was a highly publicized immigration and free speech controversy. Yet somehow, while discussing free speech and defending the administration's position, he claims he isn't familiar with one of the most relevant examples being put directly in front of him. And that matters because admitting that the case exists forces him to confront the contradiction in his own argument. You cannot spend an entire interview defending America's commitment to free speech, then brush aside a case involving a foreign student whose speech became part of an immigration enforcement controversy, and simply pretend the issue is irrelevant. That is the contradiction. And this is exactly why these debates require more than political talking points. If you're going to lecture other countries about freedom of speech, then the standard has to be applied consistently. You cannot demand one standard from everyone else while creating endless exceptions when the issue becomes politically inconvenient at home. So what do you think? Was Dave Rubin genuinely unfamiliar with the case, or was he avoiding it because it complicated his argument? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.